Hello, everyone. Welcome to our world. Today we have a special guest. We have Lisa Goodpaster. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Great. Awesome. So could you briefly describe yourself to our audience here? What would you say about yourself here?
Well, I guess I would say sometimes people call me America's favorite stepdaughter.
Okay.
That's because I grew up to prove what happened to me as a child, basically. So I am here as an advocate and a author and a person that just really genuinely cares about and knows what it's like to grow up as a child from divorce and all that accompanies all of that.
Mhm, mhm. You also, I saw that you also sometimes call yourself Torah, a female bull.
Yes, yeah, thank
Right?
you. Yes, that is my nickname. Toro means bull in Spanish, so Tora is the female
Yeah.
version. That yes, I'm Latina, and my grandpa gave me that name at like 6 months old, and it stuck. There's like 24
Oh,
grandchildren, and I'm the only one that ended up with that name. And it's true what they say: what you believe, you become.
yeah. No, I do believe that, and I think like Torah means tiger in Japanese. So that there's
Really?
another one. Yeah.
Oh, that's a new one. Thank you for
There you
that.
go. For sure, for sure. So your book is Alienation, When Parents Won't Parent, and it's based on personal experience that you've had, and we can talk about this as well. And you're also the founder of the Stephood Project. So again, let's talk about that too. Whichever one you want to talk first, your book or your project, or both at the same time.
So, well, the book is called Alienated: When Parents Won't Parent. And that was my first book and the hardest book I've ever had to write, because what's included in the book is what goes on for kids that no one really hears about, which is alienation, right? Parental alienation. And that's also why I founded the Stephood Project, was to bring awareness on what goes on for kids and parents when there's alienation, because we've normalized being a kid from divorce. As I thought this was all normal. I thought it was normal to have parents that didn't really get along, and thought it was normal growing up not liking one parent or preferring the other. And when you unravel the layers, and what's included in my book is basically what was used to brainwash me as a little kid, from the time I was like 7. And my stepmom, I was alienated, for your audience. I was alienated from both my parents by my stepmom. And it's unusual, but it's also written in my book. It's several psychologists have validated it. This is the first ever in history where a child actually grows up to prove what happened. And that's because my stepmom, the alienator, well, she wrote everything down, and I remembered where she kept it. And so that's right off the bat for your listeners, or if you've got parents that have been alienated, that's a that's a female narcissist. It's a female malignant narcissist. And it's a hard read, but it's very important because it really shows what goes into our mind also goes into our bodies.
Yeah, and when you're growing up, you trust the caregivers
Oh yeah.
as a child, and you think, as you're saying, you think it's perfectly normal. Every family is that way, and so on. Until when you go out to the world and you realize, well, there are other types of families. They do other things. It's not normal necessarily,
Right.
and that can come as a shock, but then also it's revealing because then you realize, oh, okay, there's another way of seeing things, another way of living your life, and
Mm-hmm.
also of learning from those mistakes and not repeating them when you become a parent, right? So I think
Right.
this is very crucial on many different levels, whether you have suffered through this, or again, making sure that we don't fall into that trap.
Right. Exactly. And that's exactly what I did. Was when you're growing up, you remember what you felt like as a kid. You remember not feeling happy or being upset. And when it's this type of trauma we're talking about, uh, it sticks to you, because it'll either break you or make you, right? Because we don't know. So it's important to have these conversations. And I did everything opposite that was done for me with my son. My son now is 30.
Oh,
And yeah, I did everything off of not wanting my son to feel what I couldn't explain.
yeah.
And I didn't even really accept that I had been alienated in the way that I was until I was 44 years old,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is like, now I'm like, I'm in the fives now.
Oh, that's
So
okay.
it takes a long time to kind of put it together because there's not enough information. And, nobody would want to believe that this would really happen. And that's why it's so important. It's like, no, this happens every 4 seconds in the United States alone.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. And it's that kind of like, I think it's also partly the age, because I find like midlife, when you get to that, there's certain questions you ask yourself and you go through things again, and you go through your childhood and you realize
Yeah.
some things were off. And a similar thing where you have perhaps a mother who's painting your father as a bad person, and that is actually not true. And you probably went along for it for many years until one day you say, wait, I have to doubt things. And it's tough though, because we say, okay, don't trust necessarily what your teacher says, what this person says, your friends say. But when it's at home, you expect that base to be safe and so on. So it makes it so much harder to deal with it, to accept it, but so much more necessary as well, because
Because
your
yeah,
essence comes from there. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first 7 years were like really crucial. And then the rest was like it's cautionary about my childhood.
Mhm.
But that we are not what, like, you hear a lot of things that, childhood is, it's very damaging. Yes. But it doesn't have to define us once we realize, okay, wait, because without that awareness, we can't make those course corrections. And I was always curious. I was always trying to find out, but it's not like even my own parents, everyone, it was like, it took 40 years for
Yeah.
this to come full circle. So you imagine a kid always just frustrated and like just always just angry about the divorce or whatever it was. And it wasn't that, it was that I was alienated and I didn't know, I couldn't explain it. And now that I can, it's like, yeah, this is preventable. And it's a and I'm a parent. I know it's hard to raise a kid.
Mhm.
I just couldn't imagine parents who love their kids would not want to put them through this,
Yes.
because it does it. Yeah, there were many times I was always trying to figure it out, and it's not like they say, hey, you're really sad because maybe you didn't get to grieve your parents' divorce, something happened. And so going back to, it took 40 years. It wasn't until I grew up and said, Mom, Dad, I knew it. This is what happened. And my parents, they could no longer like, point the finger, right? Because that's what parents do. It's your mom, it's your dad, it's your stepdad, it's
Exactly.
your stepmom.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it was
Or it's
all of
you. It's even
you.
worse when they blame it on you, right? And you
Yes.
don't know what you don't know, and that's the thing, though. And I think a lot of people just go along and they have these issues with partners and in relationships and so on, and they don't really look at solve the childhood issues that they had, and that's why they repeat it. And it's that was a great realization for me. It's the unconscious and how we follow those patterns and we keep doing them until we bring them out and we deal with them. And so it's like we have people who run from one relationship to another, from one divorce to another. And it's like, well, take a break and just take a look at yourself, solve
Yes,
the
that's
issue,
the
and then most likely you will not go through unneeded and unnecessary suffering once you deal with that.
I know. And you don't know, even as you said, I'm like, yep, those are the band-aid relationships. And sometimes they can be good,
Mhm.
as I was married for a good 20 years, and that was stability. That was the most that I ever had stability while I was raising my son and married. And I didn't really want to uncover my childhood. Like, why would I want to go there? That hurts. I'm here now
Yeah,
with my
right.
son and I want to be present. And then, you get older, and it's like the body then starts knocking on your door, and it forces you to go, wait, what's
Yeah.
that pain? Wait, what? So it's all in my book, as I share like a lot, even all the patterns I gained from, trying to survive, because we tend to, as kids, they're called negative love patterns, and we either rebel, adopt our parents' patterns. And I was a rebel. When you rebel, it sounds great, but you actually get more patterns because you're rebelling from mom and dad and stepmom and stepdad. And in order to feel safe, I would never be able to sit still at a dinner table because I couldn't stand hearing the dishes clank or the food chopping. It would like chalk on a what do you call it? Chalk on a chalkboard, like those like feelings. And everyone would look at me like, what is wrong with her? And I couldn't explain, like, somebody hijacked my parents from me and this is really uncomfortable because we're innocent, we don't know. And that's what's so hard is even as adults, you can have adult children walking around and going, well, they're 40 now, they should be over it. When it's childhood trauma, negative experiences shape our brains, right? But so do positive experiences as adults. So you can't stay there for long because you'll just reinforce those pathways. So it was a lifelong awakening, and it took what it took.
Yeah. And when you're living through it, was a nightmare. But once you revisit it, you basically, I find, again, I talk about my own experiences, but you release it. And then it's not a nightmare, it's just like a memory that is not attached with all the charge and emotions and then the negativity. Yes. But it's kind of like I see it, and I hope that rings a bell for you too, or makes sense. See it as kind of with curiosity in a way of like, this is interesting, right? I mean, it's horrible. I'm not dimensioning it anyway, but it's like a story. You watch a movie and you say, well, this happened to me, but the emotional like connection with it is not as strong. It doesn't bring you down. Right? You can objectively distance yourself from it, which is a great thing. If you have solved those emotions though, right? You're not deluding yourself, right? So that would be then not good, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's where you learn to and that's a lot of healing. You have to go through a lot of the different things that I had to learn to relearn how to re-regulate your nervous system and to know, like, oh wait, that's my inner child, that's my inner kid. And before you can even address, because they say like, well, what's inner child healing? I'm like, well, that's a big part of it. But before you can even address your inner child, you kind of have to know what happened and what caused it and where did this behavior come from before you can even address that inner child, because you won't even understand. It's all awareness. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And they said neuroplasticity, and that's again important because we do get stuck in some ways, but we don't have to remain stuck. And I think that's what people sometimes think when they have traumatic experience, which is horrendous and awful. But you don't have to stay there. There are ways of dealing with it, and our brain is trying to help us to get us out of there, right? And it's actually helping us.
The body is like frozen. Yes.
The panic attack is telling you, hey, there's something to worry about.
You ever have a panic attack, and in the middle of the panic attack, you're thinking, am I being dramatic? Because it feels like, you're like trying to like just breathe. And like, why are people telling me to just breathe? Because when you breathe, you're letting all the blood flow back to your brain, and it helps. It's all these survival skills that we all have. And if we look at it with curiosity instead of fear and like, oh my God, that's so horrible, as it is, it allows space to go, wait a minute. Trauma is part of life. It's not, it's really uncomfortable. It really is. But if we can get to a place, because you can't turn on the news or anywhere and not see that people aren't suffering. Now it's everywhere. Right? So we can like somehow say, okay, we are all human. We all have these just crazy big subconscious that is so hard to work with, because everything that we go through is kind of put in that unconscious part of our brain.
Absolutely. Right. And
Yeah,
I see
so
like a
yeah,
pressure cooker that kind of keeps building. And that's why people are on the edge. And that's why like little things throw you off or you rebel
it
against
triggers.
everything. And
Yes,
sometimes I wonder, it's like, well, what is the person rebelling against? There's nothing there, you know? And it's like
right.
you're rebelling against broccoli. It's like, but why? So it's
Right,
like, that kind of like small things to tick you off, right? And that's because you are really close to exploding. And once we deal with that, it goes down so many notches, and you just go, yeah, well, it's traffic. Okay, so what? And I'm waiting for a delivery that's not happening for my television, and it's supposed to come today, and they didn't. And I was like, well, okay, that's not the end of the world. There are worse
right.
things that can happen. So you have more calmness, but I do see walking around, a lot of people are tense. And because I think we had our shared suffering with the pandemic, and I don't think we're still
Yes,
okay from that, but we
right.
realized that everyone is suffering wherever you are. This connected us in a way because it doesn't matter where
That
you
is
are,
one of the
you're affected
connections.
by it. Yeah.
Suffering is a connection, and it's yes, because we all cry the same tears. You can tell when people are mad in one country or the other. We all have um the same needs. We all have a need to connect, and suffering and trauma and anger and anxiety, all these things kind of come in between being able to connect. And that's what's sad and heartbreaking is a lot of people, even myself, going through what I went through and having to feel, because in order to heal, you have to feel.
Yes, you do.
And it's like, oh
There's no
God, you don't want
shortcut,
to,
right? There are no
there's no
pills. Yeah.
shortcuts. No. And that's the hardest thing is, damn it, there's no shortcuts. And I can look back and go, God, there was a reason why all that had to happen. Because there's no shortcuts to healing. It's like kind of like I say, it's like having it's like a full-time sport. The more you do it, better you get at it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's just it can be really, really you got to be really careful because you got to watch your energy too, because you
Yeah.
don't want to spread yourself thin, and you can't really help anybody until you've kind of gone through it yourself in a way,
Yeah.
because it is very trying to tell a parent, don't worry about your kid. It's like they're gonna worry.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, I think if anything, what would have helped me is knowing what I was going through was a natural biological uh, response to the amount of trauma that I was going through. Because otherwise, when we're not given this information, then we hold on to shame. Now we're triggered, then we're angry, then we're shamed. And then people, that's the number one reason why we cling to drugs and alcohol, because it's numbing. And frankly, I can understand that desperation. And it's just about making space and going, okay, let's pull back the layers here. You're human. You didn't know. Now you know. Now you can make a conscious decision. Where do you want your life to go from here?
I think it really starts also with acceptance and kind of a radical kind of acceptance. Okay, so this is what happened to me. Really like accepting it. It's not like it's just seeing it, just acknowledging it. I think that's it, right? And you're not saying that they're off the hook or anything, right? You can still have blame there, right? For they're responsible for it as well, but this happened to me. But a lot of people don't do that, and that's the first step I think that's missing, or you don't acknowledge it.
You
and
know what
and
was
that's
hard?
the when you talk about the truth, facing the whole truth, and there's certain parts we don't like maybe about some things we did or some ways we reacted and so
Mm-hmm.
on, but it is part of the whole thing, and we have to acknowledge that too without the blame of putting us down, but saying like,
Right.
okay, we need to deal
Yeah.
with this, and we need to be honest, like completely
Yeah.
honest, right? What are some of the good things that I've done, and what are some things that are mistakes in retrospect, and that I'm going to fix in many ways? And you can, I think we really can fix a lot of things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No. I think one of the hardest things for me to let go of, because when you're alienated 40 years, you hold on to a lot of anger, right? There was a lot of justified anger
Yeah,
towards my
justify.
parents, the person that wrote that did what she did to me. And once I realized, and I had to learn it, it was that we can't survive without anger or anxiety. We can't. We wouldn't. That's like from caveman days. That's what makes us human. However, if we remain angry, then we're still in victim mode.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that was such a hard, long lesson, because you don't want to give up that anger. And it's not like it feels powerful because you're angry, but that's not power. That power is actually keeping you away from your awakening. And it's such a hard, I mean, you want to talk about resistance, and it's all normal. It's normal if you're angry and you're like, I don't want to give up that anger, because that's the brain trying to survive. It's like you're not there anymore, and that's when the body and the brain kind of get confused, and that's how you recalibrate.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. I mean, I see the tiger come out too, but, the Japanese version of you. I mean, that's definitely it. And yes, but it's not helping you. And that's the thing. It might help you at the moment when you think you have control over others, or you just like
Or
control the
danger.
situation, right?
Right.
But no, it lingers with you, and it's not helpful. And it's really important to try to let go of it, like from deep within, not superficially.
Right.
No.
Yeah. And I used I have a really good somatic and neuroplasticity therapist. So we used ketamine. We used ketamine, and I did that about maybe 3 years ago now, and that was really effective. But you still have to work at it. Like it's a tool. It's not a forever button, right? There is no forever button. You just get good at it, kind of like you get good at paying bills. The older you get, the further away you get from that pain. That's when I'm like, I don't have a problem getting older.
Yeah.
The
No,
older
it's a good
further
thing. It's a
away.
good thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I think one theory I have when we're younger, our immune system is stronger, and so is our defense system. So there's a lot of
right.
things that we just brush off. It's like, oh, this is no big deal. I can do this. It's like, oh,
Right.
it's minor trauma. That's one. But then once we get older, it weakens, and then we get like surprised or attacked
Yes.
by that, and we're not
Yep.
expecting it. So it comes as a complete surprise.
Right. I know exactly. It's like, what is going
Amber.
on? Is this old age? Like, no, it's just unresolved trauma.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's Lord. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
interesting you mentioned brainwashed, because that my previous podcast was about that. How again that it's used in terms of like propaganda and governments and throughout history and the Cold War and so on. But it's also amazing how that can happen within the smaller units like a family, and that there
yeah.
is some going. You don't need to go to a cult. The family becomes the cult
Right. I
basically.
know. I know. And that's even weird. It's like, wait a minute. Like, it doesn't feel like a cult, because I think of a cult as, like the David Koresh back,
Yeah.
when people would drink the Kool-Aid, and it's like, but I can understand when you read my book and you see like just how uh the parent in me is, even the former alienated kid in me is like, Jesus, that was a lot. But the parent in me is like, oh my God, like this is bad. This is really, really bad. And thank God now they have, kids now have a lot more access, where we didn't. I didn't know what a trigger was. I just responded. Now they know what being triggered is, or what panic attacks are.
Yeah, yeah.
In our day, and maybe in one sense it was good, because you just kind of endure it, where it's really scary when you're enduring something and you know what's happening. And that's what I felt as an adult, was like, oh Jesus, this is what it's like for the kids now. This isn't okay. This is BS. The kids, they have a right to grow up whole, and none of us are growing up whole if we don't stop and reassess and redefine being parents, being present parents, and why we need to be present parents to help our kids navigate this crazy, chaotic world. Because our parents are they're our attachment. They're our reason. They're the one reason how we survive. That's just our nature. That's biologically imprinted in us. And so
We're
that's
so
why we feel,
dependent on them
yes,
as
that's
animals are
why,
not, in the sense
yes,
that we are. We need them to survive, like for
yes,
years, right? We're dependent on
right. And we know this as parents, but like there was just that one book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, but it never said anything about, okay, your attachment, your kids are going to come out the gate with a biological need to survive, and they need their parents present. And when we go through childhood trauma, that's anything that overwhelms the body or brain, right? And the kid automatically, whether they're 2 months old, 5, 13, when a parent isn't there to help them express their emotions, what's coming up for them, those emotions as kids, we just ignore or suppress. And that's why now we have so many adults that are like this close to losing it, because probably what happened to me in some area, what happened to other people around the world is by default, by accident, out of love. This is why it's called negative love patterns. There's a saying, it's everyone's to blame, but no one's at fault, right? Because it is also because no matter what, you don't ever want to hate your parents. We don't want to hate our parents, and some of us are kind of raised to. And even if we don't have the best parents, it still hurts because we miss that parent we wish we would have had.
Absolutely.
So it's just important that parents get re-educated on the importance
that's exactly
of
right.
raising your kids. Even if you have to get divorced, I say this, if you have to get divorced, but you don't divorce your kids' foundation. Even if you have to fake it, you fake it, because that your kids need to know that. When I mean fake it, I mean you fake the sense that, look, maybe I don't love your mom anymore, I don't love your dad, but I certainly care about your best interest, and I love you.
Communication, right? Being open to them, and I think being honest, not as, but it depends on the age, of course, but also try to be as honest as you can. And often they will understand, and they will appreciate it so much more when you are. And that's the thing, the relationship you have with your child will always be the same. You can't divorce yourself from spouses. You can, and you can have other spouses, but you can't have other children. It's like, that's your child. It's a lifelong commitment, and and that's it. And even beyond that. So I think that bond exists, and it's really important to also make them understand, or try to make them understand, like where you're coming from. I think that open communication too, instead of playing the tough parent. It's like, yeah, I got this, I got everything under control, which I find nowadays people are very sensitive about parenting. And even on my podcast, if I mention like a minor criticism, I already get attacked by people who educate people about parenting. So I'm thinking, you got to be careful with that. And it's not about blaming; it's about trying to help others.
Yeah. Here's the thing I could say to any parent, like, look, even though my son is 30, I have learned more from my child, in the sense, because you love your kid unconditionally. Like, maybe because I was, he was my escape, in the sense, like, I just wanted to get out, and once I held him, I was like, I have to give him a good start. And I gave everything, in the sense of, like, I wanted to be present. And it was never about me. Never about me. And now looking back, I'm like, good God, that's what you do. Even though I divorced his dad, and, we co-parented, even to this day, my son's well-being trumps any emotional feeling that I feel like, oh, my son's growing up, or, oh, he didn't call me and tell me that something, whatever, parents just, we can't help it. We love our kids so much, but we'll love them and we can push them away, but not giving them their space and allowing them to be who they are.
I'm curious, what inspired you to write the book? What was the kind of like event or insight that you had that made you decide to write a book about your experiences, and also maybe by extension the Stephood project that you started as well, the website and so on. So, what was the impetus there, or motivation?
I think it was always there. I was always trying to write it. I had to go through a lot of stuff to felt like the Wizard of Oz sometimes, just trying to go through it. But my motivation was that because I didn't because I know that what happened to me is still happening to kids now. And nobody will listen to the kids because they think that they're brainwashed, or they think that the kids don't know anything. And when in fact, unless you're just locked up in a room, kids can see, like, okay, they can see on TV, they've got friends, they know what's going on. And I wanted to stop the because it's just getting worse. Right now, I think we are number one in the United States in single parent homes. You've got moms and dads groups fighting against each other. You've got family court in the middle, and just greed. And everyone says they're here for the kids, but no one's really doing anything about it.
I agree with you.
That's why I started
this. And I think because they don't have advocates so much, like, because you have women and you have feminism and that you have these groups and so on, but who is really speaking for the kids? And they're often too young to be able to do that. So yes. I don't think they get enough attention, especially. And so the focus is mostly on the parents, right? In many cases.
Especially kids from divorce and step kids, because they're marginalized, right? Like right off the bat, like, okay, why is being a kid from a divorce why is that considered a traumatic life event? Because it's on the ACE scores, which is the for your audience, the ACEs is that grades our trauma, right? So there's a sheet on there, and you can answer like 8 questions, and one of them is, if your parents got divorced, you get a point for that. Well, why? They don't tell us why. So I'm like, I'll tell you why. It's because when our parents divorce, we lose that foundation unless our parents co-parent and do their best to protect that. And when they don't, it's just it can feel like a lot of down and uphill battles, and it's not okay. So there's never been, to my understanding, there's never been anyone able to say, hey, we need support for stepkids and kids from divorce, like yesterday. It's 2023. And now you have step parents who feel entitled. They feel entitled. They're going and they're adopting kids in the courts. And it's like, how is that even possible? So there's so much, it's almost insane. The biggest reason why also I wrote that book was because because my alienator, the malignant narcissist, whatever you want to call them, the bad person, left evidence. So what could I do? I can't go back in time. It took 40 years. So let's just turn it into something good. So I took that evidence to help educate everyone on, this is what goes on. This is what the kids can't say right now. And it explains patterns, to parent patterns, to my patterns, and, all the things that I kind of went through, and what abandonment feels like at different ages. So all this stuff that is just so important, so that parents can be equipped with, okay, this is what not to do.
Exactly. And we don't have manuals for like how to be a good parent, but I think we should also take a look at exactly what you're saying, what not to do, what to be careful about, so we don't fall in that. We're not telling people how to proceed, but what not to do from experience. And I love it that you also, like, you're sharing that, so a lot of people can, it resonates with them, but also others who can also watch out for like warning signs and things to avoid, and pitfalls that are there. And I think that's really necessary in terms of educating here the parents. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, even, it takes a village, and I know parents would never want to put their kids in harm's way. Yeah. They love their kids, they do it out of love, they protect out of love, and sometimes their ways of doing it are really opposite of what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. But it's also we're not perfect, and we're learning on the job, right? Because there's no training for that, and every child is different, right? So you might, like, your advice might work for you, but not for my child, and so on. So it's really important to find the right rhythm, and to be open, and to switch gears or change paths. And I listen a lot to my son, and most of the time the criticism he has is actually correct. And I might say, no, you're wrong. I'm that. It's like, wait a minute. When I think about it honestly, I was like, yeah, he's right about this and this, right? And
Uh-huh.
really being
Uh-huh.
open to that and not dismissing them because of their lack of experience or their age and so on. They have something to tell us. They have something to teach us. So it's
Yeah.
it's it's a mutual relationship. It's not
Yes.
top
Oh,
down.
they will reflect back. Like if
Yeah.
you get mad at your kid, like sometimes, every once in a while my son will come back at me and I'll be like, ooh. And I'm thinking, oof, where did he learn that from? I'm like, oof, he does it so well. They're just the better versions. And so it's like, is this hurting my ego? Is
Mm,
this, yeah, you really gotta, it is a like I say like there's happy meals with your kids and then there's happy hours, right? So now I'm in that happy hour phase,
mhm.
so I get, he's 30, so I can have drinks with them, we can, hang out, and it's a different type of relationship.
Yeah,
And but it's so special still because there's so much to look forward to still. It doesn't just end at 18.
yeah,
That's just when you get to rest a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, wonderful. Yeah, wonderful discussion here. So, you are the founder of the Stephood Project, Lisa, and you are Torah, which I like in both senses here of the word, and alienation or alienated when parents won't parent. That's your book. And thank you so much for being on Rash's World, for sharing your experience, for being honest, for again talking about also the difficult feelings and stuff, because that's necessary, right? It's there, and we have to deal with them, but there's always hope. Once we do that, we take that step, there's a lot of reward, there's a lot of joy that comes out, there's a lot of sensitivity that suffering brings out, and I think that's really important. That's what life is about, being alive and
Yeah.
experiencing those emotions.
Yes,
Thank you
very
so
well
much.
said. Thank
Yeah, thank you
you.
so much. Best of luck.